Okay. Good evening, everyone out in virtual land. This is the special meeting of the Pompey Town Board. It's January 19th, 2011, yeah, 2021. And this meeting is called for the purpose of holding a public hearing on a proposed solar energy systems local law, including overlay district. We are broadcasting virtually tonight per the governor's executive order that allows us to continue to do these meetings remotely and still be in compliance with open meetings laws due to the coronavirus. So our process is that for this public hearing, we are using Zoom, and we will be live streaming this on Zoom. We will also be recording it, and the recording will be posted on the town website along with transcribed written minutes of the meeting. So what I'd like to do first is have us say the Pledge of Allegiance, which is always interesting to do virtually, but that I would appreciate it. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic
for which I stand,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under God,
God,
indivisible, with liberty
liberty,
and justice for all. Thank you. So before we get started, I don't always do this, but I think given the moment in time, I would like to offer a moment of silence for a number of things. First of all, for the loss of Jill Way, I would like to offer that moment of silence for her, that she rest in peace, and for her family and for all those whom COVID has become a grim reality. I would also like to offer a moment of silence that we have a peaceful transition of power. We have a great nation, and you can just hope that it continues in a peaceful fashion. And lastly, I'd like to have a moment of silence for the safety and well-being of those whose duty it is tomorrow to protect that inauguration, the peaceful transfer of power for our Constitution. So if we could have a moment of silence for those reasons, I would appreciate it. Thank you, everyone. I think that it would be helpful to have some introductions here for who's on this screen, so that people that are zooming in, even though we have names next to our faces, they'll know who everyone is. Starting with our webmaster, Veronica Hoteling, who runs our show here. Me, Renee Rotundo, town supervisor. Ann Christmas, town councilor. Carl Dennis, town councilor. Judy McElhennon, town councilor. Town clerk, Nikki Reed. Town accountant bookkeeper, Tom Chartrand. Thank you for joining us, Tom. Attorney for the town, Tim Proteski. And Bob Rodriguez is our codes officer. And also joining us for the specific purpose of this meeting is John Shaheen, who chairs the committee that drafted this proposed local law. And I don't know where Chris Carrig went. He sort of snuck away, or he's probably muted, not on video. But Chris Carrick is from the Central New York Regional Planning and Development Board, and he was very instrumental in helping John and in drafting this local law, and he is present for any input he might be able to offer to the public, depending on what the public's concerns or interests are. The only person who is absent tonight is Sheila Larkin, and that's unfortunate because she was a committee member, but I've spoken to her today. She has some personal issues that she's got to address. And she is promising to review this audio recording or video recording at a later date. And there's Chris, sideways Chris Carey. So I introduced you. I don't know where you went.
I lost my connection. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. So you're sideways or whatever. If you don't, I don't know if you see that.
Oh,
There you go.
Okay.
So I introduced you as someone from the CNY Regional Planning and Development Board, but what's your actual title, Chris?
I am the Energy Program Manager.
Okay, perfect. Fits right into what we need to do tonight. So the only business we actually have is because Tom Chartrand gave us some invoices to sign. So we all, Carl and Judy and I, put our John Hancocks on them this afternoon. So if someone would like to make a motion for payment of
Make a motion for payment of the bills.
I second it.
Judy seconds it. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, so I thought I would take a minute before we actually dive right into a public hearing and just, there's a couple of things I think that are worth explaining. Just so that these proceedings go in an orderly fashion and open to everyone that wants to participate. So the first thing I will do, explain a little bit about how we came to be at the position of having a draft system. You who know, in 2015, there actually was a solar energy law passed in the town. It's on the books, it's in our code. It relates only, however, to residential energy systems and did not have anything to do with commercial or being able to sell energy to off-site to utilities. In fact, it was forbidden. And John Shaheen, if I say anything wrong or I'm not accurate, please, at the end, I'll give you an opportunity to correct. So that law was in place. And then in 2019, a town resident came before the then board asking if the town would consider amending that solar energy law to include commercial, as she had been approached as a property owner in the town by a solar energy company who wanted to develop a solar farm in the town. And we didn't allow them. So a committee was formed. John Shaheen headed that committee. His members, if I get them all correct, again, because this was prior to this administration, in addition to John, was Carol Marsh and Sheila Larkin from the town board. Kevin from the planning board, as is John, actually, Shaheen is a planning board member. Jim Smith, who was a local engaged in farming, and Jeff Brown, who was then the town attorney. They formed the committee. In the fall of 2019, they brought it to the town board. And then the election happened and the administrations changed and a new administration came in 2020 and then COVID hit. So we are now at the point where we are prepared to go forward. We had a presentation from John Shaheen in August before the board on the proposed law. The members of the board have been given that proposal and have looked at it. The one thing I want the public to understand is that we are not tonight taking any vote. We are not closing the hearing. This is the start of a process of discernment by our town community. And the board is very much interested in hearing from town members and would very much information that we get tonight, concerns, etc., and use them as we move forward. So I don't want anyone to think that we are making a decision. Absolutely not doing that. We want community input. We want discourse on this. So I think that's all I wanted to say. Unfortunately, we're doing this virtually because we really have no choice. We could wait indefinitely. It's been a 2-year wait already for people that were interested in this law. But there's just not much we can do about the fact that it's difficult to have in-person meetings, especially in our town hall, which limits the size of a gathering because of its size and doesn't allow for many people to then be present to participate. Whereas at least virtually, hopefully we're reaching a larger audience of interest. Ed, I would like to turn this meeting over at this point to Tim Frateschi, who's going to talk about local law from a legal perspective. So Tim?
Thanks, Renee. I thought I'd start out with a little bit of context of why we're even considering local law to allow solar energy systems in the town of Pompey. Governor Cuomo in the state of New York has set goals for sustainable energy in New York State. I think, and Chris Carrick jump in, but I think it's by 2035, almost 50% of the energy or 45% of the energy that's produced has to be renewable type energy. Is that correct, Chris?
It's actually 100% by 2040.
Oh, 100% by 2040. So the state of New York is incentivizing or encouraging these types of facilities in New York State. And one of the things that the state has done, and we'll talk about it a little bit later when we talk about the taxing implications, implications of a solar energy facility. One of the benefits provided to anybody who uses renewable energy or sources of renewable energy is that the costs of improving your property to allow for the types of systems we're talking about is exempt from property taxes. And because it's exempt from property taxes, that is a huge incentive to develop these types of facilities. It is the default status is that property tax exemption is in place and stays in place unless the town opts out of it. Town of Pompey has not opted out of it, and therefore any solar energy system, whether it be on your home or whether it be on in your yard or whether it be a commercial solar farm, is exempt from property taxes. There is provisions in our code or in this local law that would allow us to negotiate a pilot payment with any developer of a solar farm in the town, and that would be that would be pursuant to them constructing such a facility. So we would get some taxes, but it's not what you would get under a normal assessment of the increase in property. So that's why we're considering this. The governor and the state of New York is really encouraging renewable energy, and we're moving forward with a plan to allow that in the town of Pompey. The local law is pretty simple. It's not there's nothing complicated or complex about it. It would allow and John's going to speak to the specifics of it and the details of it, but it would allow solar energy farms throughout the town once a overlay district is approved by the town board. And the overlay district would be an overlay district that basically it does exactly what it sounds like it does. It overlays a telecommunications or a solar energy systems overlay, which onto whatever property the developer is looking to develop. And they would have to come to the town board, and it's essentially a zone change that would be requested from the town board to allow the solar energy overlay systems to be allowed in that, on that property. It will be allowed in only certain districts in the town, and I'll let John speak to that. But the concept is that it would go to the planning board first for a conceptual review, and then it would go, they would review the plan, and then it would go to the town board for approval of the overlay district itself. And once the overlay district is determined, that is going to be applied to a specific parcel, then it would go back to the planning board for a site plan approval, which is the normal custom under our code, section 44 of the zoning code. So there are several points at which both the town board and the planning board would review this. There is some provisions in here for special permits there that I'd like to hear discussion about tonight. There's special permits are only allowed in the industrial and in the Hamlet commercial districts. And I think I don't think the overlay is allowed in the Hamlet commercial district. So a special permit wouldn't apply to that. But there are some issues in the local law that we're really looking for the public to comment on. There are some cleanup things that we're going to have to do. We already know there are going to be some changes that'll have to be made. But we figured we would bring it out to the public, let them have a chance to get back to us on their thoughts, their concerns, and then when we make the changes that we were going to make anyway, we can incorporate whatever the public has to say. But that's essentially the process by which a solar farm would be approved in the town of Pompey. And I will first ask if anybody has any questions for me about this. And if not, then I'll turn it over to John.
Tim, thanks for clarifying that, because I was confused on how it was going to work. So planning board first, town board for the overlay, and then back to the planning for the site plan.
Correct.
Thank you.
And that's how it was set up. That's how the local law was set up. That doesn't have to be the process, but and we can talk about whether or not the process can be should be changed, but that would be a common process anyway. It's not something that would be out of the ordinary.
Thank you.
Tim, I just to clarify, mostly for the public, I think I get it, but so the reason to do an overlay versus just to go through a site plan approval process with the planning board is what?
Well, because if an overlay district allows you to zone a specific parcel for an appropriate use, as opposed to allowing the entire zoning district to be eligible for a solar farm. And it really just gives you one extra layer of protection by the town board to look at it and determine whether or not they want to do the overlay zone change. And then all the underlying zone would still exist. So if it were in an industrial district, all the industrial standards would still exist, whether it be setbacks or height variances or height restrictions or prohibitions. They would all still exist in that district that has been now allowed for solar farms.
Thanks, Tim. I'm going to do a short PowerPoint presentation of just what the law is essentially all about. And then at the end of that, we'll have the opportunity for question and answer. So with that, Veronica, could you put the PowerPoint presentation up on the screen?
Yes, give me a second here.
Okay, so the description of how we got here that Renee did was very good. That's basically it in a nutshell. What we were looking to do is update the 2015 law to allow larger systems than residential systems and or than typical residential systems, and also allow the off-site sale of excess electricity generated. Before I get started, I'm presuming you have a little bit of understanding of what solar is all about. A couple of key things that I haven't hit specifically in the definitions in this PowerPoint presentation are what a solar panel is. And basically it's a panel made up of a number of photovoltaic cells, which effectively convert sunlight to electricity, to DC electricity, and then through the use of an inverter, that electricity is converted to AC electricity, which is what is used to power your home. The other term that you're going to see in this presentation that I haven't specifically addressed is net metering. And what net metering means is that with one of these systems, you're generally still hooked up to the grid, in our case, National Grid. And when you're generating enough electricity to power your home, you have no need for National Grid's power. If you're producing more than what you're using for your home, that power goes back into the grid and it's accrued as credits that you can use later on to offset your electrical usage either at night or when the sun's not shining enough to be able to fully power your home. So that's what we mean by net metering. Okay, so with that, we'll get started. Next slide, Veronica. So basically, the statement of purpose, as outlined in the law, and as Tim alluded to, is to take advantage of safe, abundant, renewable, and non-polluting energy resources, to decrease the cost of electricity to farmers and to other residents within the town of Pompey, to increase employment and business development within Pompey, to mitigate the impacts of solar energy systems on environmental resources, those being agricultural lands, forests, our view sheds, and other protected resources, and to create synergy between solar energy and the town's comprehensive plan, or in other words, basically to strike a balance between sustainability and protection of our scenic beauty and view sheds, which are so crucial to Pompey, which are what really make Pompey what it is. Next slide, Veronica. So key definitions besides the ones that I talked about up front are Tier 1 solar energy systems, which are up to 25 kW or 50 kW for an active farm operation. They can be roof mounted or building integrated, and I'll get into the in a minute. Tier 2 solar energy system, which is again up to 25 kW or 50 kW for an active farm. And those are specifically ground mounted systems. And then Tier 3, which would be systems which aren't covered in Tier 1 and Tier 2. However, specifically here, we'd primarily be talking about what's generally referred to as solar farms. Next slide, please. So here's just a couple of examples of roof-mounted systems. The one on the left actually is on my home here in Pompey. And the one on the right is just to give you an idea of what a flat roof installation would look like. Granted, we don't have many flat roofs here in Pompey. Next slide, please. When we're talking about building integrated, what we're talking about is the photovoltaic panels are actually incorporated into the building materials of the house. On the right is a product that's being developed by Tesla. It's a roof shingle that would actually generate electrical power to power your home. And then on the left is a type of glass that's being developed currently that would be incorporated into windows, and so that the windows in your home or building would actually generate electrical power. Next slide, please. Tier 2, which are the smaller ground mount systems. Just two examples of those. The one on the left is actually an installation in Pompey. And that's where the panels are essentially mounted on what's called a rack system. And then the one on the right is what's called a pole mount. And again, just two different examples of what a smaller ground mount system might look like. Next slide, please. Solar farms, just some examples of what they look like. Generally, they're going to be in the megawatt range or 25,000 kilowatt range. So 1,000 times greater than a residential system. Next slide, please. Just another couple of examples of different types of existing solar farms. A smaller one on the left and a larger one on the right. And I should point out too that basically what we're talking about is, as indicated in the fact sheet that was on the town's website, we're talking about 5 megawatts or less. Greater than 5 megawatts is generally considered utility scale, and that's not what we're talking about here, generally speaking. Next slide, please.
Over 5 megawatts is regulated by the state, I think, right, John? The approval process for that is regulated by the state.
Yeah, Chris, that PSC, right?
Yes, it's actually a new office that the state has created for the larger utility scale projects, and those are actually 20 megawatts or larger.
Okay. And then the 5 to 20 megawatt range would be what then, Chris?
Those are generally multiples of these smaller projects. So the 5 megawatt project is what we typically see now in the community solar space, and we'll probably get into that. But community solar is where the developer sells power through subscription to residents of the nearby area. And if you have enough land, you can assemble 3 separate 5 megawatt parcels, and all connected to the same utility system.
Okay. So the general requirements for all these systems basically start out with a building permit. The law talks about a need to protect solar access. So the reviewing board or the reviewing individual would need to evaluate solar access for the proposed system to try to ascertain whether or not it's going to remain viable for the life of its system. Ground-mounted systems, both Tier 2 and Tier 3, are specifically prohibited in residential R40, Hamlet Commercial, and Hamlet Residential, unless a variance was received from the ZBA. They're prohibited in the 100-year floodplain, historic and/or culturally significant resources within 100 feet of a freshwater wetland, and adjacent to or within an airport control zone. Not that that would apply in Pompey at this time, anyway. They've got to be installed by a qualified solar installer as determined by codes enforcement. The excess power for tier 1 and tier 2 systems would be sold via net metering, as I described earlier, and that would include remote net metering. Remote net metering, an example of that would be a farmer that has, say, multiple facilities. Maybe he's got a barn, they've got a barn on one property that's got electrical service to it, and the main farm is on a different parcel. That remote net metering would allow that individual to actually install the solar on the barn and use it to offset the electrical bill at the main operation, the main farming operation. Appropriate inspections are required, including electrical, and by the public utility of concern for a grid-tied system. National Grid's going to want to do their own inspection and before they hook the system up to the grid. Underground, the majority of the utility services are to be placed underground. Camouflaged conduit to the extent possible for roof mount systems. Neutral paint colors, and trying to blend in with the surrounding environment, and the marking of equipment for emergency responders. Next slide, please. Tier 1, which would be our building roof mount systems and building integrated, allowed in all zoning districts. There's no site plan required. It's a simple building permit.
I don't mean to interrupt, but you're breaking up. I don't know if you need to plug in or if it's just me that's having trouble hearing you.
One thing that might help is if the panelists mute their microphones. Carl and Judy.
I just mute.
There you go. Is that better, Renee? Okay. So a building permit, these systems, if they're mounted to a roof surface, a maximum of 8 inches off the pitched roof, off the surface of the pitched roof. For flat roofs, they can be a maximum of 36 inches above the flat roof or surrounding parapet, whichever is greater. Minimize glare to the maximum extent possible. There's height limitations, which are based on the principal and accessory structure requirements for the given zoning district. For building integrated systems, they're to be shown on the plans that are initially submitted for the building permit. Next slide, please. Tier 2, which would be the small ground mount systems, residential ground mount systems, they're allowed in all zoning districts except R, R40, Hamlet Commercial, and Hamlet Residential. Again, there's no site plan review, building permit. Again, minimum glare to the extent possible. They're installed in side or rear yards only, no front yard installations, and they can only be installed in a side yard if it does not abut a highway. Setbacks, double the required setback of the zoning district in commercial, industrial, or farm district, or double the required setback for accessory structures in the zoning district when located in a residential or hamlet. And again, that would assume an area variance by ZBA in order to be able to do that. In order to be able to install one in a residential or hamlet district. The height limitations are the same as those for accessory structures in the underlying zoning district. Next slide, please. There's a requirement in the proposed law for screening and visibility for these smaller systems to, number one, minimize the view from adjacent properties as well as the roadway, to reasonably avoid and or minimize blockage of views and shading of properties while still providing solar access. Adequate screening using architectural features, earthen berms, trees, landscaping that are at least 25% higher than the array within 2 years of planting, and the screening shall harmonize with the surrounding area. The lot size shall comply with existing lot size requirements for accessory structures. So basically, we're looking at this as an accessory structure. The maximum landscape coverage is 50% for all building structure and structures, including a Tier 2 solar array. Decommissioning of the system should it be deemed unsafe by the codes enforcement officer. Next slide, please. Okay, so now we get into Tier 3, the large ground mount solar farms. They're allowed in all zoning districts, again, except RR40, Hamlet Commercial and Hamlet Residential. They're permitted through approval, as Tim alluded to, of a solar energy system overlay district by the town board. The applicant must submit a concept site plan to the planning board for review and a recommendation to the town board on the overlay zoning. Then the town board would hold a public hearing for overlay zoning approval. If overlay zoning is approved, then it would come back to the planning board. The planning board would do a site plan review, and then and also hold a public hearing as part of that site plan review. On systems larger than 1 megawatt, a glint and glare study is required to be submitted by the applicant. Next slide, please. As far as signage goes, no signage is allowed. So you can't have signs out by the road advertising XYZ developer or what have you. Clearly visible electrical warning signage on disconnects, transformers, and substations. They need to minimize glare to the maximum extent practical. The lighting is limited to only minimally required for safety and operation. And any tree cutting as part of the installation is to be minimized. Existing trees and vegetations are to be left in place wherever possible and or offset with planting somewhere else on the property. Next slide, please. From a decommissioning standpoint, if they're not producing for 1 year or they've been abandoned, they must be removed at the owner's expense. As part of the application, a decommissioning plan is required, and along with that, a security bond in the amount of 125% of the cost of removal of the Tier 3 solar energy system. So if the system became abandoned and the owner refused to take it down, the town would have recourse to use the bond and subsequently remove the system and restore the site to its original appearance. Site plan approval, as indicated above, the lot that one of these goes on has got to be at least 10 acres in size. Regarding setbacks, it's a minimum 100-foot front setback a minimum 100 foot from abutting lots in commercial, industrial, and farm districts. 200 feet if the property is located in a residential or hamlet district. And again, that's not very likely, but we wanted to put some language in the code that would at least kind of drive a stake in the ground as to the larger setbacks that would be expected should the ZBA decide to grant a variance to put something like this in a residential or hamlet zone. Next slide, please. The height's not to exceed 20 feet, including the solar energy system at a maximum tilt angle. The maximum landscape coverage of all buildings, structures, and paved roads shall not exceed 50% of the lot size. There shall be an 8-foot fence and with a lockable gate to prevent unauthorized entry surrounding the installation. Screening and visibility shall be addressed. The applicant shall conduct a visual assessment of the visual impact on public roadways and adjacent properties. And there will be a minimum of a line of sight profile analysis to be provided by the applicant, and a digital viewshed report may be required. The applicant shall submit a screening and landscape plan to screen and or mitigate adverse aesthetic impacts on public roads and adjacent properties to the extent feasible. And that it's expected that would be provided by a landscape architect. Next slide, please. For projects located on land zone farm, Tier 3, the Tier 3 system shall not exceed 50% of the area of prime farmland, unique farmland, or farmland of statewide importance as defined in the applicable state, federal laws, and regulations. So if it is prime farmland, then it needs to be a very, very large lot, or they need to somehow move the proposed site around so that they only impact 50% of the prime farmland. Tier 3 systems located in agricultural districts shall also be constructed in accordance with New York State Ag and Markets to the extent practical. If there is a change in ownership, notice of that change needs to go to the codes enforcement officer within 30 days. And from a safety standpoint, solar energy systems shall not present unreasonable safety risks as determined by the planning board. Next slide, please. Abandonment. And again, we've got some language in there to cover this. It's understood we may want to tweak this language a bit. We're looking for input from the public, but the special permit and site plan approval would be valid for a 12-month period. There is provision for an extension if the construction is dragging on a bit, but if the construction is not completed after 24 months, the approvals will expire. And again, the intent there is so that you don't have the installation, the construction going on ad infinitum. They're either going to do it or they're not. If the solar energy system fails to provide electricity for 12 months, the decommissioning plan will be triggered. And if the owner operator fails to comply, the town may, at its discretion, utilize the bond or security to remove the system and restore the site in accordance with the decommissioning plan. As Tim alluded to, from a taxation standpoint, we've put right into the proposed local law that the town will require all applicants to enter into a pilot agreement, a payment in lieu of taxes agreement for all Tier 3 solar energy systems. Next slide, please. So the big question, I'm sure, is where would these likely be located in Pompey? If you look at this map that I put up there, all these dark lines are taken off of National Grid's hosting capacity map. And those dark lines of varying colors, what they represent is where three-phase power is located in the town of Pompey. There's got to be three-phase power available in order for a solar farm to be viable, because it's very expensive to run three-phase power to a location where it's not currently existing. And then the colors on this map represent the hosting capacity that's available at the various substations. So as noted below, there's essentially, well, not essentially, there are 4 substations feeding the town of Pompey. The Southwood substation, which basically takes care of the northwest and a bit of the north part of the town. The Do-Good substation, which is up in Manlius, and that feeds the north and basically the east side of town. The Pompey substation, which is that small blue box just north of the hamlet, and that feeds the hamlet and areas south of the hamlet. And then the Delphi substation, which comes out of New Woodstock, and that basically feeds, you can see there, the red down in Delphi Falls. Again, looking at this map was taken from the National Grid hosting capacity website in December. And the colors, what they indicate are the dark red essentially means there's very little hosting capacity left for that substation. The substation has very little capacity. So the areas in dark red at the present time would not appear to be very viable. The lighter red is a little bit more hosting capacity, but not terrific. The yellow and green are medium capacity. There is some capacity there, and then there's no blue shown in the town of Pompey, but you can see some blue up there in Manlius. The blue generally is plenty of capacity up in those areas. So if we take a little bit of time to look at this map, you can see there's three-phase power available on Watervale Road. Then you get to Route 20. There's nothing south of there. You head east on Route 20 and up along Windy Hill Lane. There's three-phase power. Then down to Big Hill to Oran Delphi Road. Most of Oran Delphi Road has three-phase power, but again, at the present time, not much capacity. And then down in Delphi Falls, there's some three-phase power starting just north of the hamlet and heading south. Moving west, you have some three-phase capability on Broadfield Road, obviously on Sweet Road there, Pratt's Falls Road, portions of Pratt's Falls Road, and then over to Route 91, you have three-phase capability all the way up and down Route 91, but limited, again, where the dark red is currently. And then south of the hamlet of Pompey, you have some capability, but again, right now it's somewhat limited. So that's, next slide, Veronica. I think that's it. Okay, why don't we back up a slide? So we'll open it up to question. Well, I'll turn it back to Renee. And why don't we bring it back to that map? Because I'm imagining some of the questions are going to be, a lot of the questions are going to be directed towards that map.
John, when you asking for questions, you're not asking for them from the public, you mean from the board and accept like that?
However you want to do it, Renee.
Well, we haven't started the public hearing yet, so I wouldn't want the public
Okay.
to chime in yet. I would actually, I think you did a great job explaining a lot of the the information that's contained in the law. So I'm thinking it might be beneficial to hold off on questions and let them come up during the public hearing. Unless the board, if anybody has a question from the board, or Tim or Bob.
No, excellent job.
Thank you.
There needs to be a large bond involved when one of these is built because we've got towers that we don't even know who owns them and they've been abandoned long ago. And we want to avoid that because we're going to take some down at our expense up there.
I agree.
I agree, Carl. I looked at this with an eye towards what's been going on with the cell towers and read it with that in mind.
So, John, I have a question. Basically what you're saying is the red lines, it's not viable for us, for somebody to be putting a solar farm in those areas then. Is that correct?
Well, I should explain that a little better, Bob. That's the current data that's on the National Grid hosting capacity map, which would, I mean, basically, if they upgraded those substations so that they had more capacity, then potentially it would be viable. But in the near future, yeah, not in my mind very likely.
So that really limits where somebody could be putting a solar farm up then.
Definitely.
Yeah. At the present time.
At the present time, yes. Thank you.
So thanks, John. I think we'll move on to the public hearing part of this. So we've got an explanation of the process. Tim's talked about the legalities. You've talked about the provisions in the proposed law, which I give you a lot of, you have stuck with this for a couple of years and I really appreciate it. You've been very committed to this cause. So, but unless anybody else in our group has a question, I'd like to get the public involved. I see there's quite a number of people on the call. So,
No, I'm all set.
okay. So could everyone mute, because I did have someone saying, let me just go back and check. Oh no, Chris posted something in the chat, which is fine. That NYSERDA has guidance on how towns can protect themselves from abandoned solar farms. They recommend approximately $50,000 per megawatt. Some towns require an independent engineering report to verify estimates of costs from the developer. Thank you, Chris. That's good information to have. And I will add that we've had, since the initial inquiry in 2019, there have been recently 2 more inquiries. I just learned about one today from our codes officer, Bob. And there's been another one that came through late fall, early winter, I forget exactly when. So what I'd like to do is move on to the public hearing part. And unless you want me to read the legal notice, I would waive it. And then
I waive, we move the legal notice.
I'll second that.
okay. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. And then I would need a motion to open the public hearing.
Make a motion, we open the public hearing on the Solar Energy Systems Overlay District.
Second it.
Okay, Judy seconded it. Carl made the motion. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Before we open this up, I would like to set a few ground rules. Because and the one thing I'm going to emphasize is we members are listeners at this point. We are not participants. We are here to hear from our community. We want to know what you think. Veronica Hoteling will be monitoring the public comment portion now through our Zoom platform. And if we can just try to establish a few ground rules to make sure this is fair and it's open and order, everybody gets a chance to be heard. First of all, anybody who wants to speak can speak through the chat box at the bottom of your screen by typing in your comment or your question. Or you can ask through that chat, I think it's through the chat, to be unmuted if you would like to be heard. Actually, we can hear you like you can hear us right now.
Just raise your hand.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Where is that on? I don't even know where that is. I know what you mean, but is that on each individual?
Should be in their main menu, right where their Q&A is.
Okay, so raise your hand. Okay. I just want to make sure people know how to wait. Let's make sure that we respect each other's right to and have an opinion, even if it's different from ours, because discourse is good. That's how we come to good decisions and consensus. So please, please respect each other's positions. Unless it calls for a simple yes or no answer, my thought is that we would hold answering questions until the end. And if Nikki is on here, maybe she could keep track of questions. If it's simple yes or no, I think either John, if it's about the provisions, or Tim, or Eric could answer them. But if it's a simple yes or no, that can be provided during the discussion. Otherwise, I think just for to keep, so we don't get bogged down and get off tangent on something, we'll answer questions till the end. And then if you could please, if you've had your chance to speak first before you ask to speak again or chime in again, it's only fair. And if your comment is, I agree with so-and-so, or me too, or words to that effect, we get it, we'll understand. If you feel the need to speak or comment anyway, that's fine too. And please address your comments to the board, not to between attendees. It's hard to control that virtually, but I need to ask for the attendees that want to speak to cooperate with that. Please just ask your question or comment to the board. If the board, excuse me, if the board members have questions at the end of the public's opportunity to comment, we can hear them at the end after the public has had a chance. Comments have come in, a few of them, in written format or by phone, and I will read them into the record at the end of the public comment as well. And then before we adjourn, we will discuss next steps with everyone, so everyone is aware of how we intend to move forward. So with that said, does anybody else on the board have anything to say about that, or
No,
everybody good?
I'm all set.
Okay,
Yeah.
then I think what I would like everybody to do is mute, except for John and Tim and Chris, be available to answer questions unless there's something particular that the board needs to respond to, which is not. And it's to hear from the community, so I'm going to mute.
Okay, I have two attendees who have raised their hand. I'm not exactly sure who was first.
Veronica, I forgot one important thing. People need to give their name, their full name, not their online name, and then where they live.
Okay, I have full names and they can give their locations when they speak. So the first one is Stan Gorman. So I'm gonna go ahead, Stan. Okay, Stan.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep, sure can.
First of all, thank you to the board and all those that are involved with this project. I know it's been a long time coming.
Can you tell us where you live, Stan?
I'm sorry, 7154 Sevier Road.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I'm sorry, thank you. As I think most of you know, I've been associated with the towers and the tower issue, and just being involved with that for 20 plus years, would have some concerns about any solar farm that's going in as well. And those concerns would be the same as that we would have for the towers. Some of the issues that date back to 1981 with the towers are the same issues that we're going to be addressing shortly. Concerns, I want to make sure that the residents are protected, that the town is protected, that any plan that we have has the potential to be modified. I don't want it to stay the same for the next 100 years, especially when we've been told that we have to go 100% by 2040. So concerns there. What is the farm giving off as far as, energy, electromagnetic? I don't know. It's not my forte, but I've got some concerns as with the towers giving off radio frequencies. Aesthetics is a big one. I moved to this community and my home sits not too far from this proposed site that we're kind of talking about. So what is it going to do? Aesthetics, property values and such. Other than that, yeah, I agree. Looking at this map, this Sweet Road project, does it make sense being labeled as red? Again, I don't know. But thank you for your time, concern in this matter. I know you as a board have not taken anything lightly. And so thank you for all you're doing. That's all I got.
Thank you. Okay, the next one is Patrick Frazee. Okay, Pat. Go ahead.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Sure can. Can you
Yeah,
tell us
we
where
can hear you.
live?
Okay, great. Well, thanks. Again, yeah, I want to thank everybody for taking on this project too. It's I'm glad to see it happening. However, some concerns that I have as well, a couple of things. I probably will say some things that everybody knows, and forgive me for saying them, but solar energy, for clarification, is neither non-polluting, nor is it efficient. It does pollute. And of course, everybody's idea of pollution may be different, but it is certainly view pollution or eye pollution, however you want to say it. It's not efficient either because, and my numbers are a little old because we looked at it for a big project for our farm. And the only way that it was at all to be considered feasible was to have 70 to 80% subsidy from the government. And then it was still borderline. To me, that's not efficient energy or efficient use of our dollars. And the last thing is we're in a position to benefit from this. However, I don't think that anyone would appreciate it, given if you go to Town of Pompey's website, the first picture that shows up is a picture of one of our fields. And if you just envision that same photo with several thousand solar panels on it, I don't really think that anybody is going to enjoy that view. And that's my view of pollution. And then from the zoning side of it, being a member of the zoning board, I have concerns as to what variances we would be giving and how would we be guided to give them with most of our variances now are driven by precedent. So I'm concerned there is how, as a zoning board member, we would grant any variances. But and again, thank you for considering this. That's all.
Thank you. Okay. This is someone on chat. Dale Sherman. Renee, I don't have a location.
Maybe he can type one in, but why don't you read his question? Ask him to type, I'm asking him to type one in so we know where he's from. And then if you can read his question in the meantime.
Okay. Oh, 3844 Pompey Center Road. Okay, what are the PV system tax considerations for the various tiers? Are any changes being considered for opt-out? Could tax levies change after a system is installed and adversely affect a system's budget plan? So I don't know if you want to, again, this is a question, so I don't know if you want to answer this or. How you want to handle this?
I would push that, and I'm sorry to do that to the questioner, Mr. Sherman, but I think we should push that to the end because that sounds pretty. Need to weigh in on, or even John, I don't know. But correct me if I'm wrong, three.
Renee, this is Chris. I'd be happy to take a stab at it unless John wants to jump in.
No, go for it, Chris. Renee was breaking up a little bit. I didn't hear everything, but no, go for it.
So it's my understanding this draft law does not opt the town out of state property tax law. So under the current state property tax law, these systems are tax exempt unless a municipality opts out. Rather than doing that and making every solar system in the town, regardless of its size, so including small residential rooftop systems, rather than opting out and making all of those subject to property tax, this draft law states that for the larger systems, the developer will need to seek a pilot agreement or a payment in lieu of taxes agreement. By doing this, again, the town is protecting folks who've put a few panels on their roof from changing their budget plan and being adversely affected, while still gaining the revenue that would be appropriate for those larger systems.
And if I could just add, one of the things that is often asked is, can you opt out for large farms, but not opt out for residential? And the answer to that question is no. The exemption either is in or it's out. It applies to everybody, and you can't opt out of one class over another class. And then the pilot negotiation is going to be you'll find that there is a set amount that a utility or that a community grid developer will not go above in terms of the pilot payment because it just wouldn't be financially feasible for them. So the pilots that I've seen are all within the same range. which is to say it's not nearly what you would get on an assessed property.
Okay, question from Greg Hurley to the board. Is any town official involved in tonight's meeting is any town official involved in tonight's meeting currently in the employ of any entity promoting solar technology? And he's on Pompey Center Road.
No
No.
to Judy. No,
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 No.
Nope.
Another question on chat from Mary Baum on 3405 Sweet Road. Can you clarify if there is a particular location being proposed? I thought I heard someone mention Sweet Road.
Three, 4, 5, 7 Sweet Road. Looks like it might be close to you, Mary.
Clarify, Renee, that is someone expressing an interest in developing it. We don't have an application in from anybody at this point, or no formal request.
We could not because we don't have a law that allows it. So it is somebody who is interested in.
Okay, that's everything I have on chat, Renee. Okay, I spoke too soon. Okay, another question from Greg Hurley. Should the town board pass this local law, can the town attorney discuss if this could be subject to the residents petitioning for a permissive referendum?
You want me to answer that, Renee? No, it's not subject to permissive referendum. There's certain things that certain local laws or certain special districts that would be formed, which would be subject to permissive referendum. But a local law related to the regulation of solar energy systems would not be subject to permissive referendum.
Greg says, thank you for that answer. And Mary Baum just commented on that there's a vacant lot right next door to her, which concerns her regarding the proposed solar that you have, Renee. Martha Viglietta has a comment. She lives on 4116 Gibbs Road. The main focus today is tier 3 systems, but I noted that there is language that limits tier 1 systems to 110% of the historical electrical usage of the residential property. This is not adequate for applicants who plan to add electric cars and or geothermal heating. This could be the case for many residences. We have a plug-in hybrid vehicle, an electric vehicle, and a geothermal system. Our solar arrays were sized to power these. Our solar arrays generate much more than 110% of our prior usage. Can the limitation be increased?
we could certainly take a look at that.
Unless Chris knows of any reason we couldn't increase it, I don't see why we couldn't increase it. But I don't know if there's something in statute that requires the 110%.
There's no statutory requirement. NYSERDA's program rules for the granting of its solar incentives have traditionally limited those incentives to 110% of the occupant's historical energy usage. And that was really a mechanism to distribute the incentive dollars equitably across the state so that folks weren't oversizing their system, if you will. Within NYSERDA's program, if folks have plans to add an electric vehicle and a charging station at home, they can get an exemption from NYSERDA. So I certainly think it would be reasonable for the town to either adjust that absolute percentage as a number, or to grant some flexibility in that regard.
Good question, though, Martha.
And for those that don't know, Martha is on our Environmental Conservation Commission, so. I like that she's already got her Tesla and everything else.
Okay, as soon as I say I think that's it on chat, I'll probably get another chat. But I do think that may be it on chat. I do have one more from the Gormans, Renee. Should I go ahead and let them, they have their hand raised? I know they were
Yeah,
once.
let them.
Sorry, yes, I was nodding, just so I don't have to unmute, because I guess when I unmute, I'm not clear for some reason tonight, so I'm trying not to talk.
Okay. And yep, I did get one more in chat. From Dale Sherman. There's a national trend towards electrifying everything for demand side and renewable energy for supply side. The beauty of this is in the overall system's efficiency and reduce pollution. I think it would be wise for the town of Pompey to continue down this path. Okay, Gormans, go ahead.
You're muted, Linda.
Go ahead and unmute yourself. Do the Gormans want to speak again or no? You need to unmute on your end. Oh, now Stan.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can now.
Okay. I have a question. I'm looking at the map. So the yellow lines or the yellow roads is where it would be most beneficial for solar?
Yes, and that means there's some capacity there, some hosting capacity.
So what
Some
road,
reasonable.
what roads are in that vicinity of the yellow?
That yellow section north of the Hamlet is Pretz Falls Road.
And north by the reservoir, that yellow area?
That would be. I'm thinking that might be Frank Long Road.
I think Frank Long is
the lower yellow, and then Sweet Road keeps going, and there's another intersection where it's yellow and orange, and that's probably, but I'm not positive.
You cut out.
I
Renee.
know, I'm so sorry.
What did you think it was?
I think the two yellow lines, one is Frank Long, or no, one is Broadfield. Then the more northern one,
Right.
and then the lower, the one that could be Frank Long, because it has that curve, but where it comes across where Broadfield is.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's correct.
So if off is Sweet Road, there's a little red with a dot.
I think that's your road.
Okay.
Yeah,
But
I
I'm
think
not-
I think that's just the short section of Sevier Road.
Okay. Okay, I was just trying to read the map. Thank you so much.
Sorry, I couldn't do better on the map.
No worries. Thank you
It
for
was a,
explaining.
it was a photo of their web page on my iPhone. So
No worries. Thank you.
This is Chris. I'll just say this National Grid map is available to the public. So if you just Google National Grid hosting capacity map, it'll take you to the webpage, and it's fairly straightforward to navigate. And as John indicated, it is changing all the time as more projects get proposed.
if you go to that website, you'll just need to set yourself up an account with a username and a password.
There's just more questions about that Sweet Road location for the solar project. It appears to be in the red zone. Is that even possible? From Mary Baum again.
Chris, maybe you could respond to that. Keep in mind that these maps they're updated monthly, but maybe Chris could shed some more light on that.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. That's correct, John. The maps are updated monthly, and my guess is that the developer has already put an application into National Grid for interconnection, because my memory tells me that section of Sweet Road was not read maybe 6 or 8 months ago. So my hunch is that the developers already put in an application with the hope that they would be able to apply to the town for planning board approval. And that's probably what took up all that capacity on that line.
Mm-hmm.
Chris, I'll add that you're probably right, because the developer
Renee, you cut out for me. I don't know if others were able to hear you.
Yeah, me as well, Renee. I can't hear you.
Can't hear you.
We heard part of your question. The rest was muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I'll just say that the developer has already, that's working on the Sweet Road site, has already told me that he thinks there's capacity there. So you're probably right, Chris.
As folks can imagine, there's a lot of competition to get in the queue with the utilities. And so sometimes the developer will just pay the fee for National Grid to start their engineering review. with the hopes that things will work out on the town planning side of things.
If there are no more questions, I have a couple that I think would be really, they're basic, and I just think it would be really good to have it out there.
There's just one that came in, Renee,
Yeah, and that's fine.
from Barbara Stacer. Barbara, can you just type in your location? The question is, she's on Sweet Road also. Has an environmental study been requested or completed?
I can handle that if you'd like, Renee. You want me to answer that, Renee? Okay. So the town board will be required to do what's called a seeker analysis under the State Environmental Quality Review Act to determine whether or not the local law itself will have a significant environmental impact on the town. There are several questions in there that we will have to review and answer. If the town went forward and passed this local law, each project that comes before the town board and the planning board will have a separate and distinct environmental review, either under seeker or probably would require some kind of viewshed review of the project to be considered before any site plan approval was made or any determination was made on the overlay district itself and whether to grant the overlay districts. So the local law itself is a concept. There will be an environmental determination as to whether or not the concept itself will have a significant environmental impact, but each individual project, if this local law was passed, would have a separate environmental review.
Regarding the developer, why is the town supervisor discussing this with a developer on a site that seems to be predetermined?
I'd be happy to answer that. I would like to acknowledge it's from Greg Hurley on Pompey Road, just so we're clear who's doing it, but people call the town all the time looking for information. This developer chose to call the town supervisor instead of the codes officer because he knew we didn't have a law. He knew that we were looking into it because of the owner of the property who was sharing information with him. This developer provided me at my request with the concept site plan. I shared it with the entire board, zoning board chair, because I wanted everyone to be aware that there had been an inquiry. And it was an inquiry only because we don't have a law.
There was also a question about the ZBA and the variances. How would the ZBA consider those variances? Would you like me to answer that question? Okay. First of all, the way the law is set up, it refers to variances as area variances. I think that's incorrect. I think we need to change that. This would really be a use variance, which has a completely different set of standards than an area variance. And if we are going to get a use variance for allowing this in a district that's not, that it's not allowed, we would, my position would be the zoning board would be hard pressed to issue a use variance for this in a district that it's not allowed in. In terms of the area variance for setbacks in a district where it is allowed, you would go through the same standards to determine whether or not the setbacks the area variance setbacks that are required under the law under site plan approval would be, whether the benefit to the applicant would outweigh any detriment to the community. And that will be a very difficult standard to meet too, I think.
Couple more have come in, Renee. Carol,
That's good.
Carol Porto on Pompey Center Road. Where is the power going that would be derived from the solar farms? Is it staying local? Everywhere else that windmills have been installed, it hasn't benefited taxpayers or communities. It only benefits the property owner.
Chris, do you want to take that one?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So in terms of where the actual electricity goes, the way the grid works, just as a matter of physics, is that these systems will be putting electrons onto the power lines that we all see on the roads that we drive every day. And that power will get consumed wherever it's needed in the local area. And one of the reasons why the state is pushing for these types of systems is because they provide the power closer to where it's needed, rather than the large central power stations we've all grown up with, where you lose a lot of the power when it has to be transported 100 miles or 200 miles to where it's needed. So there's a lot of benefits to the grid as well as to the environment from that physical point of view. The way the developers make their money, as I said earlier, is that they are selling the power. Actually, they're selling credits that appear on your utility bill to subscribers that sign up like a cell phone plan. And there's lots of folks who are interested in buying green local power. And a lot of these projects have waiting lists that are pretty long. By Public Service Commission rule, the developer is allowed to sell to any utility customer within the utility load zone, as it's called. So for National Grid, the power could be purchased by someone in Oswego or Syracuse or even down in Cortland. It really depends on who signs up and who signs up first, really.
She follows up with, it's not necessarily staying in the town of Pompey.
Well, again, Carol, just as a matter of physics, the power that's produced will be consumed. Let's say the project on Sweet Road were to be approved. If that were the case, I imagine all the folks up and down the line on Sweet Road would be actually consuming that power, whether or not they're subscribers to that system or not. So really, these projects provide a community-wide benefit, again, in the sense that we're not losing a lot of power as ratepayers from shipping it long distances. But you have to subscribe to get the benefits of the utility credits on your National Grid bill.
From Barbara Stacer again, who is on Sweet Road. Will the effects on home values in the area be taken into consideration? Aside from environmental impacts, I feel we need to examine all impacts to our community. And Mary Baum wants to know what the town will be doing to keep residents aware as this progresses.
Well, let me answer Mary Baum first. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. As far as the local law goes, we will address that when, as soon as the public hearing ends, but suffice it to say, what I said at the beginning, which is this is the start. We will take everyone's questions and concerns into consideration and your suggestions. But we will continue the public hearing probably in our next meeting. We haven't talked about that as a board yet, but So what you need to do is just keep track as far as the local law goes, if that's what you're asking. It will progress through the town in terms of whether or not it gets approved and in what form, what substance it gets approved. And what was the other question, Veronica?
The other question had to do with assessments and whether or not that would be taken into consideration. As a general rule, the assessor will assess properties based on the marketability of the property or the replacement value of the property or the income of the property, the income ability of the property. They don't usually, if this zoning law was passed, if this local law was passed, the zone you are in would assume the types of uses allowed in that zone. So there's not, as a general rule, we're not, the planning board or the town board wouldn't be looking at the impacts on assessment as part of an environmental review.
You know, if I could jump in there, I guess I read Barbara's question differently. I thought she meant, will the town consider that these projects may reduce the property values of residents, of neighbors that are near the project? And I think that goes to a question that Mr. Gorman had asked earlier as well. And, you know, I would just say to that there's been a fair amount of published research on this topic. And to date, we have not seen any negative impact on property values from these types of solar farms. We've known for a long time that adding solar to your own roof actually increases the marketability of the house. But we have not seen any negative impact from longitudinal studies that look, you know, several years before the installation and several years after to see what effect has been on property values.
Seth Shapus wants to know, why is this being pushed through so quickly? What is the hurry? Why can't we wait until after the pandemic when we can do this in person?
It's not being rushed. It's been 2 years in the making, first of all, if I could respond to that. Again, can you hear me? I'm worried now that people can't hear me.
Yeah, so far so good, Renee.
Okay. The pandemic caused us to have a virtual meeting. It's not ideal, but when I see that we have 40 people on this call, that's more than we would probably have had if we had it live. And it reaches, so I'm not sure that having a, I can't say that, but it's very difficult right now to have a public hearing in person, number one, as I've said. But secondly, we now have property owners who are interested in the town putting a law in place that addresses solar farms, the tier 3 projects. And what the town board, prior to my becoming supervisor, took up was that request. And it was because our law did not cover it. And I don't know if there would have been any backlash. Tim, you might know better. If we hadn't done something, would there have been any ability, if the town hadn't decided to look into it?
I'm sorry, Arne, ask the question one more time.
Is there any, would there have been any recourse? Backlash is probably the wrong word. Would there have been any reason or recourse, not recourse, what's the word I'm looking for? Would we have would anybody have been able to take any action against the town if we hadn't pursued looking at a local law? Probably not.
Yeah, I don't think so. If we don't have a local law in place to allow solar farms, then I don't think they'd be looking in the town of Pompey for development of those sites. Could somebody say that the town is discriminated against solar farms because they don't have them? Yeah, I mean, you could always make that argument, and there might be some exposure, but as a general rule, I don't think so.
Just to emphasize, this law was brought to the board's attention. Not the other way around. This was not something that the board took up on its own. It was brought to the board's attention and the board responded. Not my board, but a previous board, but we've inherited it and we're pursuing it. It was a proposed law that was ready to be reviewed by the board when the administration came in. So there has not been a rush on this at all. It's been the opposite. But there are property owners who have an interest in seeing something on the books. That's the best answer I can give right now.
Greg Hurley, several older citizens in this community don't even know this meeting is happening because they don't participate in online technology. It's a disservice to them to proceed in this fashion. And Barbara Stacer encourages everyone to take a drive to Route 365 between Rome and Floyd to see what a solar farm field looks like. Many homes nearby have listed their homes for sale and are not able to sell them. They are now in an undesirable area.
If I could just respond to that last question, I would say I've driven by that farm many times, and would just encourage folks to note that that farm has no visual screening from Route 365. There's a fence which you can see through. The setback is very close. I don't know how many feet it is, but that project would not be built, would not be allowed to be built as it is in the town of Pompey, according to this solar law. Again, I think the committee has done a great job in requiring visual screening that addresses the legitimate concerns about visual pollution. So through vegetation and other means that John described. And that's what the best examples of these types of laws are doing right now. That project was done over 10 years ago, probably 12 years ago now. So it really is just a different, it's apples and oranges.
We could just languish like this forever if we're waiting for another question. So at some point, I think we need to end this for tonight and have pick it up again at our next, perhaps our next meeting. I just wanted to ask Chris a few quick questions. They're factual, and I just think the information is good for people to have to be thinking about. If we're talking about with tier 3, 5 megawatt farms, which is these solar farms, how much acreage does that typically involve?
So the general rule of thumb is about 5 acres for every megawatt. That can vary from project to project, but that's a pretty good rule of thumb. So the 5 megawatt project would be about 25 acres.
Okay, and then, another question about that. Given the limited, at the moment, ability, capacity in Pompey, how many 5 megawatt solar farms would Pompey support, I guess? I don't know if I'm asking it the right way.
I think I understand the question. Unfortunately, it's difficult to answer that. Really, these projects have to overcome a number of hurdles in order to actually be built. And we've touched on them tonight. The first is the utility side of things. Can they physically actually be connected and put power onto the grid? The other main concern is the planning and the land use part of it. And, on that side of things, developers are not looking to develop projects on difficult sites. What's a difficult site? A difficult site is one that's wet, that is sloping, that is likely to, be valued by the community for its visual, aesthetics or visual resources, that has a lot of trees on it. All of these things add cost or time, which is the same as cost. And so there's a lot of other opportunities that a developer can look at. I think the point of showing this map, if I could speak for John, is just to really kind of allay any concerns that residents may have that the town will be overwhelmed with these types of projects. When I look at this map, I'm not seeing opportunities for, a dozen projects in the community. I think it's really a couple of projects probably that would be the max at this time. Now, National Grid can always do more to upgrade its system that would allow more projects to be built down the road, in 5, 10, 15 years time. But the way things stand today, I'm not seeing, many opportunities here in the town.
Thank you. That's all I have, but I see another question came in.
You want to say this is the last one?
This is the last one, and I know it's from Frank Irwin, who is the chair of our ECC. He lives on Route 20. Just spare us having him to have to type it in.
Okay. The question is, are there stormwater impacts associated with these large farms due to increased runoff?
You want me to handle that, Renee?
Yes.
So what would be required for any of these farms, either on at the planning board level, once they do the site plan review, is what's called the stormwater pollution prevention plan, where they would have to show that the amount of water coming off of the property is no greater, or the rate of runoff of that water coming off the property is no greater than what was pre-development. So yes, there would definitely be a review of the stormwater impacts of a project like this, if it's a development of 1 acre or more.
This meeting, I'm still gonna have to go back and listen to this over again. A lot of information. So that should end our public hearing for the time being. Board members, if you could unmute. Oh, wait, I do have but I don't, I have a couple of, and Tim, I need your advice on this. I have an email from a resident. I also have one from our zoning board chair that I could read them in, but I'm worried about my sound here. I'd rather wait if that's okay.
Yeah, we can, you're going to continue the public hearing until the next town board meeting, right?
Which is February 1st.
Right, right.
Is that good with all board members that we continue it then?
Continue, I make a motion, we have a continuance to the public hearing on this February 1st.
And I can, okay. And the only discussion is that I will try and Zoom from the town hall. Maybe it's better there. I normally don't Zoom at home, but, and then I'll read these into the record then. So other than that, any other discussion?
ECC is going to meet and discuss this.
Thursday night, there is an ECC meeting. It's public. There'll be a Zoom link put on the website for anybody that wants to listen into what the ECC discusses. Thanks, Carl. And other than that, all those in favor of
Make a motion, we adjourn.
well, no, wait, we got to finish the one motion first. All those in favor of continuing this on February 1st, the hearing?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, now, Carl,
Yeah, motion to adjourn.
I second it. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, everyone, especially Chris, for your time tonight. It's very much appreciated, Tim and John, for your input. And we will reconvene.
Great job, John.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Hi, everybody.
Good night.
Right.